in commemoration of the International Day to End Violence Against Women on November 25th. The webinar today will focus on issues of violence against women, and we have various speakers that will touch upon different aspects of how that plays out. If this is your first time attending a webinar with IWA, just to share a little bit about us, we are a global alliance of mainly grassroots organizations that address women's issues and women's needs around the world. We also work with various different nonprofit institutions and organizations that seek to meet the needs of women. We are committed to the people's struggle for national liberation, sovereignty, and advancing gender equality. We're also united in the liberation of women from historical oppression and exploitation. We aspire for a society that recognizes, promotes, and protects the rights and interests of women. We also seek to intensify local struggles and campaigns against U.S. intervention, war, and exploitation. And we also work to strengthen international solidarity through campaigns, joint actions, and cooperation. So again, thank you all again for being here. For this webinar, our goal is to continue to expose the ongoing war on women, which is the title of today's presentation. We want to talk about how women are impacted around the world as a result of these large systemic issues related to global imperialist war, the imposition of neoliberal policies that exacerbate the oppression and exploitation of the toiling masses of people, and that are upheld through fascist state repression. We also want to discuss the plundering of the natural resources in the colonies and semi-colonies by imperialist powers that has created catastrophic devastation to the environment due to climate change. So in our program today, we're going through our general welcome. So thank you all again for being here. And then we'll get into a global situationer. And then I'll introduce our different panel of speakers. We have an incredible lineup today. And then we'll have a short video sharing of some garment workers that are waging a campaign right now against Nike. And then we'll take a 10-minute break. After we come back from break, we'll do a 15-minute Q&A, and then we'll close out with some calls to action and some announcements. So that is our overall program today. We can go to the next slide. I do want to say that we're very honored to have with us 5 incredible women and community leaders who continue to lead the fight against these systems and to share their stories of struggles of the everyday forms of systemic violence experienced by their communities. So we'll have Yejide Orunmila from the African National Women's Organization, and she's going to share a little bit more about their campaign against CPS, or Child Protective Services. And then we have Mai from the Malaya chapter in Chicago. Mai will share about their experience during our No to APEC protest this past November in San Francisco. And then we'll have Rita Acosta with the Movement to End Rape and Incest, an institution that's based in Montreal, Canada, to share about the experiences that migrant women face there. And then we have Triana Wardani, who is the Secretary General of Seruni, an Indonesian-based women's organization, to talk about the impacts of climate change on women. And then we'll have Hadil Shatara from Samidun Network, based in Palestine, to talk about the current situation happening right now in occupied Palestine. And then we'll introduce the video after. But before we get into each of our panelists, I do want to introduce Katie Comfort, who is our IWA US coordinator, to share with us the global situation of women.
Thanks, Donna. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie. Like Donna said, I'm based in the US in Portland, Oregon. And I've been organizing with the International Women's Alliance since late 2019, early 2020. Excited to be with you all today to further discuss this really important topic, which relates to IWA's longstanding campaign on ending violence against women, and relating that to state violence as well. So to kind of frame what all of our panelists are going to talk about today, we'll be going into a global situationer just for the next like 10 or so minutes. To kind of frame this, really wanted to look at what is the current economic system that we're living in, how is the world organizing itself, and we currently live under a neoliberal economic system as part of global capitalist imperialism. And neoliberalism has lots of different features, but the main ones we really want to highlight and kind of deepen our understanding of are liberalization, privatization, and deregulation, which are all like policies and like ways that neoliberalism plays out through government intervention. But the overall kind of like framing of neoliberalism is that it's the prioritization of corporate rights or like private companies' rights over the needs and rights of individuals. So the government kind of passing more laws and responsibilities over to corporations and loosening the government's role in the day-to-day lives of people. So when we talk about liberalization, that's really the loosening of government control, which can look like in a global system, not imposing tariffs on goods and services that are imported to a country. The goal of that is what we call free trade, right? That it's free for companies to import goods into other markets around the world to really expand their global reach. And like it says, the goal is to reduce the cost of goods sold in importing countries to increase profits for major corporations, right? And when we're talking about these corporations, a majority of them are based in the global north, especially in the US and Europe, as well as Canada. And so many of those corporations are also part of that imperialist system and are a result of monopoly capital growing over the 20th century. There's also privatization, which is the control of social services, handing over control of social services to the private sector. So this, in the US, that looks like a lot of our day-to-day services being privatized, things that used to be public, like healthcare, schools, things like that. But in the global South, what we're seeing is that privatization actually starts to commodify things that are just natural, right? So Nestle owning a majority of the water in like the African continent or across the developing world. Other things like, I think water is like really the biggest example, but the privatization of land, the privatization of education in places where there's not infrastructure built yet, it's built privatized from the beginning, right? And so starting to see this move away from nationalized resources that belong to all people or that are like public and moving towards the privatization of resources. And then the last thing to emphasize is deregulation, which is the removing or weakening of government regulations that protect workers and the environment. And so not only is it like moving resources over and privatizing them, but it's also lessening the role of the government in the day-to-day lives. And so what happens under deregulation is that worker benefits get cut. There's no protection for things like minimum wage or like limits on how many hours someone can work. This is also what leads to like massive amounts of child labor in certain industries across the world. And it especially impacts industries like the garment industry and agriculture, where a lot of women work around the developing world as well. Proponents of neoliberalism claim that this like neoliberalism is the solution to all the crises in the world, right? That neoliberalism is going to solve the economic crisis. It's going to bring about peace and stability, and it's going to help expand markets so that everyone's way of life is improved, right? And the billionaires also support that, right? They start these major like philanthropic things and start to say like, yeah, we're saving you because we're rich. We can like solve the world's problems on our own. When in reality, what we're seeing in the world right now is actually all of these different crises play out. And so neoliberalism, as the highest stage of imperialism, has really led to these different crises that are happening around the world, whether that's the climate crisis brought about by major like open pit mining and logging operations around the world, the war crisis, where the US is competing with other countries now and really waging these wars of aggression and creating new military agreements. or the economic crisis, where we see not only massive inflation around the world, but also economic stagnation, right? So that stagflation that really means we're on the brink of an economic crisis or like collapse, something like similar to the recessions of the early 2000s. And so when we talk about all of these different crises, what we can really see is that it's actually because of the privatization, the deregulation, and the liberalization that all of these things are actually manifesting and like coming about. They're not coming out of nowhere, which is what the neoliberals and the billionaires and the ruling imperialist class really want us to believe. But they're created by the system that we live in. And so all of these also really impact women. And so all of these, like the climate crisis is displacing tons of women from their land, not only because it's not habitable anymore, but because there's actually like militaries coming in and forcing people to move when land is like designated as an area for a mining project or a logging project. When we talk about the war crisis, this past year, the US signed countless new military agreements with countries around the world as it prepares to kind of encircle China and wage war on many different fronts. One of those was between South Korea and Japan and the US. And in order to get that agreement signed, the US brokered an agreement between South Korea and Japan, where South Korea basically surrendered all demands of justice for comfort women to engage in that agreement with Japan again, which is abandoning these calls that women have been bringing forward since World War II, saying that they demand justice and recognition for the sexual slavery that the Japanese army put them through during World War II. And the economic crisis really forces a lot of women to either move from their homes and leave their families to make money, but it also means that the costs of day-to-day living, the like basic goods that are needed, just aren't accessible. And so then it creates this additional crisis for women and their families of not being able to afford food or having to, like I said, move, which we'll hear a lot more about later as well with the migration. In the world too, we can see that it's not just us versus the imperialists, right? At the heart of it, it really is. And that's what IWA is all about, is uniting a majority of women and organizations against our imperialist oppressors. But we also have to see how it's broken down. So it's monopoly capital or like corporations versus labor. And this last year, especially here in the US and in other parts of the world, we saw massive uprisings of labor from the health sector, education, food and hospitality, all rising up and saying we demand better wages and better working conditions. And a lot of those were led by women as well. We see it between imperialist powers, the US continuing to kind of provoke these like military agreements that are really surrounding China and other countries that they're competing against on the global scale. We also see it in imperialist powers versus oppressed nations, where the US will kind of try to quell or ensure that they have access to countries with raw materials that they need to wage their imperialist wars. So places like Ethiopia and Somalia are really critical for global trade. We've seen a lot of US drones dropping bombs there. I read a statistic that this year alone, the US dropped an average of 46 bombs per day on countries that they're really using those bombs to justify further invasion of. And then finally, it's the imperialist powers versus national liberation struggles, which we're so honored to have Hadil with us today. As we learn more about what's going on in Palestine, but also recognizing the role that national liberation struggles play in really opposing imperialist domination, and not only winning the like basic rights, the like social and national liberation of their people, but also helping tear down imperialism on a global scale as well. And in all of these things, in all of these situations, it's really women that are caught in the crossfire, right? Whether that's the comfort women during World War II, the hundreds of thousands of women who were kept as sexual slaves for the Japanese army, the femicides throughout Latin America that really increased with the passing of free trade agreements and the lack of development and secure infrastructure for women and their families, the attacks against organizers around the world, whether that's in the US or Kurdistan, here, or the Philippines and Palestine, where women are kept as political prisoners or they're killed because they stand up and demand their rights, and really point out what's going on and what their government is doing. And also the women who are forced to migrate and then during their journey out away from their homes are actually killed or become victims of issues of like dehydration or lack of nutrition. And so we really know that when we talk about violence against women, it's not just the violence that we can experience in our like intimate families or our communities, but it's actually state violence, the violence that's being perpetuated by the imperialist ruling class. That's the number one perpetrator of violence against women. And that's really, when we talk about ending the war on women, what we're talking about is ending imperialist violence against women and knowing that ending that really solves a lot of the core issues that we're facing when it comes to being unsafe in our day-to-day. We also see pretty often that women are used as justification for imperialist aggression. And so that's another thing we really want to oppose, whether that was women in Afghanistan who under Taliban rule, the US used as an excuse to invade Afghanistan for over 30 years, right? And said that they were freeing women. But at the end of the day, when the US left, women's situation was actually worse than when the US originally invaded in the 80s. We also see war hawks like Hillary Clinton, who are celebrated as feminist heroes by the mainstream like elite, really propping up women in Afghanistan as a reason for the US to continue their invasion during the Obama administration when he was saying he wanted to pull troops out. It was really the use of women that justified the US troops staying. So we also have to really investigate when are these times that the imperialist powers are using women and our issues to actually justify their invasions and their violence against other countries. Most recently, that's been really common in the Zionist attacks against Palestinians after October 7th, the Al-Aqsa flood. Both Biden and Kamala Harris have like openly made these claims about sexual assault and rape that happened to Israeli hostages. But in fact, there's actually no proof, right? And it's kind of this perpetuated like myth that really gets propped by our media here in the States about who's violent and who's not violent and which violence begets for further violence, right? And so those claims about sexual assault have really justified a lot of the Zionist assault on Gaza that have been playing out since October 7th as well. Even though there's no proof, and there have been hostages who have come forward who have said that they were treated well while they were in detention, right? But the people in power are always going to use whatever justification they can to justify their violence. And then finally, it's also used in cases like the most recent decision by the US and the UN to send quote unquote aid and support to Haiti. They really cited a lot of sexual assault on women as a reason to ensure that there were more forces on the ground in Haiti, ignoring the fact that it's actually the like systematic underdevelopment of Haiti that's led to the economic crisis that's leading to the issues women there are facing. And so what we really see across the world that imperialists do is they claim to care about women in cases where it benefits them to continue their imperialist plunder, their neoliberal schemes. But in reality, it's women who are suffering in the day-to-day because of these policies, because we're displaced from our homes and aren't given the services and the resources that we need to live full lives. And so this is really why we need a global women's movement today that not only unites different organizations around the world and builds international solidarity, but is actually also united against imperialist war and aggression that perpetuates this violence against women and that brings women together under the banner of no more war against women, no more imperialist wars of aggression anywhere, and knows also that women are part of this movement globally where we actually can change the system, move away from neoliberalism and into a system that is centered on rights and needs and really meets the day-to-day needs of women and our families all across the world. So I'll pass it back to you, Donna, but thank you. I'm excited for all of our panelists today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. I think it's really important for us to lay out the context by which we're operating in and the systems that we're fighting against. So up next, we have our very first speaker. I'm very excited to introduce Yejide. Yejide is the president of the African National Women's Organization. It is an international organization founded by the African People's Socialist Party in March 2015 to address the specific oppression that African women face as a result of colonial domination. As president, Yejide is responsible for the international growth of ANWO by creating initiatives that respond to the economic, social conditions that remove African women from revolutionary political life. Under her leadership, ANWO has built branches and established membership in the US, Africa, and Europe. Through Yejide's travels to Africa, South America, the Caribbean, Europe, and within the borders of the United States, she has seen the effects of colonialism on African people and the specific oppression that African women face. Through African internationalism, she believes that what must be done to solve all of these issues for African people, to overturn their relationship to the current social system, and that any struggle made towards liberation must include the full participation of African women in order to be successful. ANWO has been organizing against the state-sponsored kidnapping of African children and criminalization of African parents through its campaign Arrest CPS. Black women and their relationship to the prison system as prisoners and as supporters of incarcerated persons, anti-African dress code policies in schools, and horizontal violence. Yejide is also the creator of ANWO's Decolonise. Did I say that right? Hair and body skincare brand, which is the organization's main economic development project. Decolonise products remedy everything from dry skin to eczema. The brand uses quotes on its packaging to encourage conversations about wellness and freedom. Yejide is the mother of an amazing young woman and resides in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Please join me in welcoming Yejide.
Greetings. Thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me to this webinar and for giving me the being flexible based on the fact that I won't be able to stay during the whole thing, which I'm really, I really would love to, but I have some previous events that I've coordinated for today. But I appreciate everything that Katie said, and I really just want to help everyone understand the context of which we organized the Arrest CPS campaign. So in the United States, where I reside, we recognize that the family regulation system, which is what we're calling it, the family policing system, is directly connected to the colonial capture of African people brought here to work for the colonizer, and the commodification of Black human beings for the benefit of the colonizer. So we believe that colonialism is domestic. We're experiencing domestic colonialism in the United States, and that colonialism as a mode of production still exists in the world. And we are actually organizing ourselves and helping other people understand that colonialism has to be the foundation upon which we have to destroy colonialism. Because if we don't, colonialism allows for the capture of resources, of human beings, the exploitation and oppression of people, African people, but also colonized people around the world. And there's a relationship of power that we have to sever ourselves from. So, and we also believe that because the colonialism was never destroyed, it was something that the colonizers decided to alleviate themselves from direct colonialism by passing it on to neo-colonial leaders in different places around the world, that because colonialism is still in place, all of the institutions, all of the policies, all of the laws are colonial laws in the United States and in other places around the world. So what people see, so even the child so-called protective service agencies are colonial institutions that continue the colonial attack on African, indigenous, and other colonized people in the US. And the only thing that you have to look toward is the statistics that come out around how many Black children are in the foster care system. And the reason why we highlight Black children, even though other children are also in the foster care, in the family regulation system, is because there is a disproportionality that exists that is greater than, and far beyond any other child that has been captured by the state. And we make the connection between the prison system, which has a growing, it has a high population of African people in prison, a growing population, which is also high, of African women who are being incarcerated, and all of the other statistics when it relates to African people in the United States and even abroad. So, for example, we experience the highest rates of infant and maternal mortality, not just in the United States. It's the highest, obviously, but it's in the developing world, it's a conundrum, right? Like, why are Black women dying when they have all access to these resources? And we understand that is because of colonialism. And if you look at all the statistics across the board of African people in this country and beyond, you can see that we do not fare well. And so we understand as the underpinning of all of this is the colonial mode of production, the capture of our resources, the oppression and exploitation of people. And more concentrated than anything else, you can see this in the foster regulation, family regulation system. I have to train myself to say that more and more. Because it's not about fostering or caring or trying to reconnect families or solving problems. It's about policing Black families. It's about taking and capturing Black children, commodifying Black children. And the more children that you have in the custody of the state, the more federal money that you get for your state's CPS institution. So we are seeing that African children are being captured, are being held longer, and in some cases are not being returned to their families. And we also recognize that while people are very concerned about children and they don't want them to be harmed, and they believe that there is some salvation or some saving grace to the family regulation system, we also recognize and understand and try to educate people about the fact that if there are contradictions that may exist in the home, these are not contradictions that were created in some sort of bubble, but that if there are Black families who are experiencing violence, who are experiencing drug use, who are experiencing neglect and economic deprivation and all these other kind of things, it's a historical and a systemic root to all of that. And even when you take children out of those situations, they still want to be with their parents, but you don't help the parents figure out how to fix these things. You actually give all of the resources to foster families, while the parents who are struggling or maybe trying to rectify any situation that make them vulnerable to the state don't get any resources and are experiencing deeper and profound trauma. Imagine you're already experiencing crisis, financial or otherwise, and then someone comes in and takes your child. And then you're supposed to be like, good, you'll be okay. No, you're going to experience deeper crisis. Your children are going to be experiencing crisis. You don't know where they're going. And in some cases, if there are multiple children, they're spread throughout different counties and they are not kept together. And so what we advocate for is a community response to child welfare that is not tied to the colonial state, that we have organized ourselves. We are also organizing to expose this and to help more and more people understand that the family regulation system is not a system of care and unification and rectification or repair. It's a system of policing. And just like many of the colonial institutions, it's not there to usher in a connection between Black families. It's actually doing more damage. And I did not prepare any slides today, but I would challenge everyone to take a look at the statistics of Black children in the foster care system. In almost every state in the United States, Black children are overrepresented in the foster care system. So for example, 13%, African children are 13% of the US population, but represent 27% of all children in foster care. Let's go down to a smaller percentage. If you go to, say, Washington, D.C., if you go down to Washington, D.C., even though Black children are the majority, they're still, what was it? I think they're 54% of the population, but 84% of all children in the foster care system. And so these are the kinds of numbers that we're seeing all across the board. And so we recognize that this is something that we have to challenge, fight against, And we believe that it hits at the core of the colonial mode of production in the US. First, because it exposes colonialism to its core. Second, because it ties and connects the foundation of US colonialism with the establishment of chattel slavery in the United States and how that has not ended. And we connect that to also the US imperialist agenda throughout the world. Like, how is it that African children and parents are experiencing criminality, US criminality across the world, the underdevelopment and the elimination of resources, which forces African children and parents to be separated in different places around the world, meaning that there are so-called adoption agencies and things like that that facilitate the trade of human bodies and also make our communities vulnerable to sexual and human and just regular human trafficking. So, you know, we absolutely believe in the destruction of the colonial mode of production. We believe that um, the imperialists that will bring down the entire system, and that we will begin to have an opportunity to heal and rectify and create solutions that will deal with any contradictions that occur in our communities and our nations. And the more and more that we build a movement around this to challenge this very blatant exploitation of Black people in children form, but also the criminalization of Black parents who are targeted for state and targeted for jail and targeted for to be tied up in the criminal justice system, injustice system of the United States. It's really devastating to see just this impact. And families, even if the children are returned, there's never any healing that happens. You're harmed. Some children are kept away from their families for over a year, and some children are never returned. And parents, it's the emotional terror, the policing, and the constant connection and interactions with the state re-traumatize you every week when you have to go see your children, you know. And so it's something that we bring to this table so people can understand that it's not just these things around abortion and healthcare for African women, but that on the micro level, that Black women and other and even Indigenous women, high instances of Indigenous women also affected by this, are being attacked on a daily basis, and their connection to their attackers are every week, every day, and is constant, and it breaks them down. And you know, when we talk about building a movement, I mean, that's just some of the things that we've been trying to do for a very long time. And we have the Black, I know my time is up, but just wanted to mention this last thing, that we have the Black Mothers March that happens in Washington, D.C. on Mother's Day. We've been doing it for the last 3 years. And we invite every person who can really understand this connection between the U.S. colonial state and just the commodification, oppression of African human beings and other colonized human beings, that this is a place that you can help support, but also communicate, you know, what is happening in with you as well. So I just once again want to thank the organizers for allowing me to speak, and hopefully I'll be on long enough to take any questions if there's a questions and answer.
Thank you so much, Yejide. I know that you have to leave soon, but I think the issue that you shed light on to everyone here is something we don't often think about. We don't think about CPS in that framework, but I think what you pointed out in the role of the state and the way that it impacts particularly Black families in this country is just a continuation of the ongoing colonialism of Black people here in America. So thank you so much for sharing and shedding light on that very, very important issue.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Mai. Mai is a Filipino organizer with Malaya Chicago, which is an organization advocating for human rights, democracy, and sovereignty in the Philippines. During the recent No to APEC protests, Mai became a victim of physical and sexual violence at the hands of the San Francisco police. She continues to rise up for a free Philippines, free Palestine, and for an end to police brutality. Please welcome Mai.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Donna, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Um, so, thank you to IWA for hosting this event and for bringing together really phenomenal women fighting against fascism and neoliberalism across the globe. I want to really say Dugan Kadasig, or more power also to my fellow panelists. It's really amazing to hear of all of the work you are all doing. And really, we're resisting every day despite the attacks we face as women, as queer folks, and activists. So, really, more power to you all. So, as Donna shared, unfortunately, I became a victim of police violence, both physical and sexual violence, on November 15th in San Francisco while protesting against the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, or APEC. And I want to really start by talking about what we were protesting and why APEC is so devastating for women across the world. So just to really quickly talk about APEC, APEC is an international forum with 21 member economies in the Asia Pacific region. And APEC aims to facilitate economic growth through free trade and investment in the region. But we know in reality, this is a ploy to make the Philippines, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Thailand, and other countries subservient to imperialist powers like the United States. And we know that APEC spells disasters for countries like my homeland, where further economic, political, and military treaties will be drawn to surrender our sovereignty, democracy, and human rights. The Philippine President Marcos Jr. was also actually attending APEC in San Francisco, aiming to sell off our people, lands, and waters to the highest bidder. Marcos spoke to Filipino community members, saying things like, overseas Filipino workers must be kings and queens of overtime, and hindi ko kailangan ibenta ang mga Pilipino, meaning I don't even need to sell the Filipino. He said all of this while Filipino caregivers and domestic workers in the US are victims of human trafficking, are forced to work 24-hour shifts, and are receiving as little as $64 a day. He implied overseas Filipino workers are just an indispensable resource to ship abroad at will, as though our people are simply commodities to be sold or cash cows to the Philippine government, made to face discrimination, workplace abuses, and exploitation abroad. In relation to Filipino victims of hate crimes, he even said, wala tayong magagawa, which means there's nothing we can do. Yet it's the same neoliberal policies facilitated by forums like APEC that force our people abroad in these dangerous conditions. It's the same neoliberal policies which plunge our country into a worsening economic crisis where people have no choice but to migrate in search of livelihood. During Marcos's trip to San Francisco, we saw that U.S. Secretary of State and Philippine Energy Secretary signed the Section 123 nuclear agreement, which would allow the U.S. to export nuclear technology and materials to Manila. And this is really devastating to our country, a country that's already prone to climate disasters, that poses threats to the health and safety of our homeland. It also sets a precedent for the US to allow nuclear arsenal to be stored in the Philippines that places us in the middle of tensions and potential war between the US and China. But as the Malaya movement, we waged protests every day against Marcos's visit, proclaiming that Marcos is not welcome here, that the Philippines is not for sale. And we made it clear that we would not allow him to sell out our people in our homeland. And we also joined protests against APEC every day, demanding an end to the neoliberal policies that spell catastrophe for workers, women, and oppressed countries around the globe. So what was the people's response to this, right? Over 160 organizations joined the No to APEC coalition, and we held a People's Summit with over 800 people. Honestly, I think there would have been more people if the space allowed for it. Like there was more people on the wait list that wanted to come, but it was really, really beautiful. We had, folks from all different movements and spaces. We had panelists, we had different workshops where folks were like phoning in from around the world. I attended an IWA workshop where we had someone phoning in from India, I believe, which was really cool. And then, the next day we actually had 10,000 people take to the streets to protest against APEC. And, each day of the summit and the protests really included vibrant people's movements across different sectors and struggles, including labor, migrants, women, workers, climate, youth, and different people's liberation struggles too. And really, you could see here, like, I'll just show these little cute pictures. We had folks from Chile, we had, folks who were from different faith organizations. This is really cute, 1,000 grandmothers for future generations and against climate injustice. We had folks from Pacifica, the Philippine movements, indigenous peoples movements across Latin America. So it was really, really beautiful. And across the board during these protests was really a resounding call for a free Palestine, which I thought was really beautiful as well. We held protests throughout the week at every summit for APEC, at every stakeholders meeting, at every Marcos gathering, at every CEO gathering to show that the people have had enough of these neoliberal schemes. And so, that brings us to the week of action that we had against Marcos Jr. and APEC, and particularly to my case. So on November 15th, we protested against the CEO summit that APEC was holding that brought together monopoly corporations, the wealthy elite, and the heads of state that are aiming to really suck the wealth out of oppressed countries so the rich could profit. And hundreds of people protested for over 4 hours to put the APEC forum and the CEO summit to a halt. People like Brandon Lee, a survivor of an assassination attempt at the hands of the Philippine government, locked down in front of the CEO summit. Our action was really successful in turning away APEC attendees, heads of state convoys, and at delaying the summit significantly. So just really quickly, a trigger warning, I'm going to discuss the acts of violence against me, and it's particularly sexual and physical police violence. And so during the No to APEC protest, I acted as a safety marshal, placing myself in between protesters and police to protect the crowd. And while I was peacefully protesting on the sidewalk, police started yelling at protesters to get back. And particularly Sergeant Jensen took his baton and started choking me by lifting me up by the neck while he was pushing me into the crowd. The police kept grabbing my breast. What they do is they grab my breast like this and then push really, really hard. And Sergeant Jensen was actually caught on camera by the SF Standard. He was pulled back by another police officer, and as he's standing there, he goes in to grope my breast again. So he didn't even have the intention of pushing me at this point, and it was clearly sexual assault. I was really glad I was trained as a security marshal at this point because I instinctively took photos of their badge numbers even while I was shaking and crying because of what they did to me. After things calmed down, I moved out from being a security marshal. I asked folks if they could take over for me. And I was asked to speak on the mic about this police violence immediately after. And I was really happy to call out that police violence. I called out the police for inciting violence on us and made it clear that the mass movement will hold them accountable. It's glaringly obvious that the police were there to protect the profit of the 1%, to protect fascists like Marcos Jr., all while harming peaceful protesters like me. Since then, I've suffered from muscle inflammation and back spasms that made it hard for me to stand for more than 10 minutes. Yeah, sorry, this is kind of hard to talk about. I've had nightmares and bouts of crying thinking of what happened to me. I had bruising and discoloration on my breasts, which was a brutal reminder of the trauma those police officers put me through. And I've had to take an unpaid leave from my job to recover. I'm really thankful for the support of the mass movement, the support of mass organizations for helping me navigate healing from this incident and calling for justice. And unfortunately, I was not the only protester that was assaulted this day. Kristen, who's a member of the San Francisco Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines, was also violently pushed by the police on the same block, resulting in long-standing injuries. And how does the San Francisco government respond to this? Actually, SF Mayor Breeds is looking to give police overtime pay with the APEC reserves that they gained from that day. And we say, hell no, we want funds for the people, not for police violence. Additionally, Sarah White became a victim of brutal assault by an APEC attendee that day and is suffering from unbelievable injuries. She was in the intensive care unit with multiple traumas, including bleeding close to her brain and serious head trauma. Her jaw was broken and several of her teeth were knocked into her jaw, and her arm has been injured. Thankfully, she's out of the ICU, but her road to recovery will be a long one. So please donate to her fundraiser to support her. I'll link that in the chat in a little bit. In general, we know that these cases are in a wider context of state violence and repression against the people, in which police militarize, harm, or even kill, especially Black and brown working class communities. And what's it for? Nothing but for the protection of property, the protection of profit, and maintaining of this economic system of violence. So what are our action steps? What are our demands? We're still figuring out next steps on building a campaign around my case and around others. So please be on the lookout for updates on that. I'm also looking into filing a legal case against the SFPD. But one thing's really for sure, we're calling for Sergeant Jensen to get fired for his violence against me and other protesters. No officer, let alone a sergeant, should be able to put his hands on women like that. And we're calling for an end to police brutality and sexual assault, and to hold offending officers and witnessing officers accountable for their crimes. This is not the first time that police officers, while violently repressing protests, have actually groped women or queer folks, right? It's almost like a standard practice for them. And I'm sure that Sergeant Jensen, it wasn't the first time that he had groped a protester. But here are some potential ways to take action now. You can Venmo to support the campaign for justice and support for protesters' recovery through Malaya Chicago. We'll figure out a way to distribute the funds amongst the different folks who were impacted, as well as to help wage this campaign, help cover legal fees, flights, and other things that we need to do. We'd also love for folks to donate for Sarah White's recovery. She has a GoFundMe, which I'll also link in the chat. You can share statements of support like the one that's on the Malaya Movement Instagram. You could either just share it to your story or make your own statements of support. And, as the campaign does start carrying forward, we'd love for all of you to join this campaign for justice. Additionally, we want to continue to resist against policies and agreements coming out of APEC. So join our campaigns to fight against the US-Philippines nuclear power deal that I discussed earlier, which places the Filipino people and land in danger. We want to educate our community around issues of APEC. Marcos is selling out of the Philippines, and the Philippine government's horrid budget allocations, which prioritize profit over people. And we also want to continue to expose Marcos's corruption and demand services for overseas Filipino workers. We want to continue the fight in solidarity with people's struggles all over the world. So ILPS, or the International League of People's Struggle, which was a convener of the No to APEC coalition, is putting on a campaign called Defend People's Struggle, which will include calling for justice for No to APEC protesters. So keep an eye out for that as well. We also have, unfortunately, a lot of neoliberal activities happening in 2024, like RIMPAC, or the Rim of the Pacific conference, the NATO conference, the North Atlantic Trade or Treaty Organization conference. We have the Democratic National Convention, the Republican National Convention. So please be prepared to mobilize against these. I just want to say, really, I'm wrapping up at this point, but thank you so much to IWA for holding this space and for allowing me to speak about what happened to me today. One thing that I've heard a lot from Gabriela organizers is, abante babae, palaban militante, or, continue the fight forward, women, fight militantly. So thank you all so much for having us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mai, for your bravery, your, vulnerability, and of course your determination to stay fighting and holding accountable these state forces that, as you stated, are really only there to protect the interests of the ruling elite and not really there to protect, civil society, which is actually their main job. So thank you so much again. I know that wasn't easy, and we will continue to fight alongside with you. You're not alone. Um, yes, we'll just take a moment. I know that was a lot. And yeah, the experiences of women come in various different forms, whether it's in the home, in the community, or by the state itself. So I thank everyone again so much for sharing your story. Um, Up next, we have a very special guest who also happens to be part of the IWA Executive Committee. We have Rita Acosta, who is the Executive Director at the Movement Against Rape and Incest. It's an institution that's based in Montreal, Canada. MCVI is a feminist organization that has existed since the 1970s, but from 2000 onwards, it began to welcome mostly migrant women victims of multiple forms of gender-based violence. Rita has since mounted an intervention program and political analysis to fully include women of color, immigrant, refugee women, and women asylum seekers into the center's work of countering gendered and sexual violence. Further, Rita Acosta is a founding member of the International Women's Alliance, as well as a member of IMA and AMOR. She recognizes that the exchanges with the members of these alliances contribute to a dialogue not yet seen in the scope of actions involving immigrant women in the Americas. She believes that they allow members to unpack common and key issues, as well as enable groups like the MCVI to frame solutions from a defense of rights perspective, bridging women and migrant struggles of the global North and South. Rita Acosta is responsible for engaging with groups and civil society institutions that work with immigrant women in the region, as well as acting as an intermediary between the center and key stakeholders. Her focus lies in merging socioeconomic and political analysis with advocacy for women asylum seekers who face sexual violence. She's interested in the issue of torture and in sexual violence as a form of torture. So join me in welcoming Rita.
Thank you so much, Donna. I would like to share my presentation. I don't know if I can do that.
Yes, Katie will go ahead and share the presentation.
Let me see.
I'm just pulling it up. Oh yeah, you got it, Rita. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Great.
Okay, so let me just post it like this. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm just going to go really very briefly about who we are, because Donna, you already explained everything, and I wanted to thank again the two presenters before. I think that the situation, and I'm really sorry about names, I'm so bad with names, but Jehidi that did was something that is happening here in Quebec and in Canada, particularly with Indigenous people and Latin American kids as well, being taken from their homes and their mothers, and not even given access to them again. So I just wanted to put this note because anger is loaded with information and energy. And I really like to say and repeat that for myself a lot, because I want to be anger. I don't want it to be silent. And the more anger I get, I guess it's like May that was just doing her presentation, she's so strong because at the same time she's so angry. So let us be angry. Why not? People always say, and especially men say, that we should be quiet and we should not be angry. We should be sweet and we should be nice. And that's not us. That's not us women. So who are we? The Movement Against Rape and Incest, as Donna said it, we are since the 70s a feminist group. Our mandate and our mission is really to promote women's rights. Of course, that we give a lot of services to women that have been sexually assaulted in different circumstances. And lately, for the past, I would say 5 years, we have been going a lot through the trafficking of women that come from the South. We, at the beginning, we started with women from Africa. And lately we are seeing a lot, I would say hundreds of women that are coming from the South America. Just a quick overview of the origins of migrants arriving to Canada right now in October, since October 2022. It's more Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, and Turkey. Of course, I won't go into all the immigration situations here in Canada, which have become completely horrible, I would say, for migrants in particular. But since they closed the borders, we have been seeing an increase of people that we have a very, very, very cold winter. And we have been seeing people that since June 2023, they closed the border and they are trying to cross it. And already we have found that, well, I mean, we have been reported that people that have been either drowned or frozen in the passing from the States. And I agree with what was said before, police are really brutal, and immigration officers from the States, especially in particularly, are animals. We have been reported of many cases of rape as well from the border officers from the States. The root causes of migration, and I really like the presentation that Katie gave, so that it will really put us, let me just check the time because I might talk too much. Just put the table on everything that's, and why we are fighting so hard and for so many years. The situation of migrants in Quebec lately, since we put more emphasis looking at that. In French, it said le chemin de la mort, which is dead road. That name was given by African women that were coming to our center because it's the Darien, they call it, the border from Panama and Colombia. And recently we went to Costa Rica, that was in February this year, and we were able to interview a lot of women that were crossing the border, as well as men, of course, and what was going on over there. Then I recently went over again. Things have really changed. Things have been, how can I say, organized for the migrants, because they were just being received in little tents and things like that. But now they really have a detention center for migrants that are crossing the border from Panama to Costa Rica. And then they take the road to Central America, Mexico, USA, and Canada. Now, what are the root causes of migration? Among them, they say poverty, lack of opportunity, increase of violence. And lately, I mean, the people from the United Nations were saying, well, a lot of people like adventures, especially young people. Who would risk their life for an adventure through the forest? With all the rapists, all the animals that are there, all the people that are doing the trafficking. So it's like they are trying to turn all these situations on, people are getting out of their country because they want an adventure. They want to see something else. Social class and gender, the marginalization of women because of her socioeconomic conditions, and who define these conditions. Like Katie was saying before, one of the things that we found there is that when they were at the border of Costa Rica and Panama, they were banks and they were Western Union, because they know that, for instance, people that come from Haiti, They go through Brazil, Chile, and then they go up. And in each border, they will be receiving money from their, from their family. So they have very conveniently put Western Union offices, because that's money. So this migration is giving a lot of money. And when we talk about the social class, we are reproducing this class domination, which is fueled by gender, that fuels that of gender, when we consider that the first defines the second. So it is very important to understand here that for us to understand, at least for our organization, to have a bigger analysis of why are women fleeing their countries. It's not a question of adventure. And we have met many, many women that they are coming with their children, and young, very young children. Just last night, I was with these 12 families from different countries, Venezuela and Colombia and Haiti. All they crossed the Darien, and all of them had children. I just started seeing them. So, and I could see the sadness of these women. I didn't want to go into all the situation of the sexual violence they might or might not have gone through. But one thing is common, is all the violence they went through up to getting here to Canada. So that's very important. Now, imperialism, it's the exploitation of our land. So when I ask women, what is the situation right now, like in Venezuela, like is the situation in Colombia? So it's all the exploitation of our resources. It's pushing out our people, it's pushing out our women, it's pushing out our men. And then, unfortunately, is the exploitation of our women. How? Through the trafficking, selling them for for prostitution. So we must remember that mining is one of the things that are going on a lot in Latin America. Climate change has brought issues and problems within each country and each city, I would say, that it's making displacements of these women, trying to find something better for them and their children. And then, unfortunately, they get in this trafficking road, because to be able to go from one country to another, they are being exploited by the people that are supposed to offer them or to give them some opportunity, like the immigration officers, the police. So warring woman, it's like when we see this global economic crisis, we have to remember, like right now, the situation of Palestine. And I really like what Katie once said about, they are saying about all the rapes that Israeli women are going through, and with no proofs exactly. But we received here proof about the situation in Palestine and the women in Palestine and what they are going through. And it's not only like, it's rape at the most outrageous situations and ways that we can even imagine. And yes, it's torture. It's torture when you touch a woman in those ways. Then we have seen the situation of women in Russia and Ukraine, either be from Russia, either be from Ukraine. They both are going through the same things, the same crisis, poverty versus richness. So if you have a certain situation, if you are of a certain social class, you might be spared a little bit. And what about women on the South? What about women in Latin America? It's like we have put in right now all effort to see what's happening in these countries like Russia and Ukraine and Palestine, which are very important and very really preoccupying these situations. But we have now like kind of put aside. And when I say we, it's not us as such, but it's the public in general on what's happening in the South. So that's where it comes the path to the border. What is the situation here in Canada right now, and especially in particular in Quebec? So each time that a woman or a group of women or a group of migrants go from one border to the other, they are going through a lot of violence. They are going through these traffickers, which are really taking a lot of money from them. And then they have to sell their bodies in order to go from one country to the other. Like, for instance, let's say one person that goes to from Costa Rica to Nicaragua, and then from Nicaragua to Guatemala, they have to pay each time. They have to, because they are being stopped all along the way. So they have to pay. If they don't pay, like in Panama lately, they said we don't get to go from the prison that they are until we pay at least $300. So they will let them cross. So the situation of trafficking, they are being stopped but more particularly in Mexico, and then to be smuggled to the United States or to Canada. So this situation is bringing a lot of killings, femicides, because people from the South, the family, they lose track of their sisters or mothers, and even the children. So the situation with immigration here, it's really bad, because we have a lack of resources in the sense of we don't even know where, immigration even, they don't know where to put these migrants right now, because they don't have enough housing for them. So what happens at that moment is that they are having to live on the street. So because we have such a cold weather, we are wondering what's going to be happening later on, because they have no help from any organizations as such. We are trying, we have a few NGOs, but even the NGOs are very worried because of the situation. And I just put a tax on NGOs that we are working with trafficked women right now. And I think that it's a global situation, because I don't think that it's only us. We heard that it's been happening the same thing in other countries in Latin America. And because of the organized crime, which gives a lot of money, we have to now be more careful on the outreach that we can do to these women and the help we can bring to these women. Because these traffickers are following them, and we are like, one of the late cases that we had, one woman was supposedly protected by the police, but still the man was in prison, but still he was able to outreach to her and have her cut her tongue so that she won't talk. Then we have been receiving threats from mysterious people. So we have to be really careful. So it's really an attack on NGOs, because this is to discourage us of what's going on and what we should and we shouldn't do. So I don't want to pass. I don't know if I still have time, but I didn't really check my time properly, Donna. So if I have any questions.
You're over time, but if you want to wrap up soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the situation in Quebec. We have a lot of people now that are with, they don't have housing, they don't have food, and they are being persecuted by immigration. We have a lot of deportations, and we have as well bunch of situations of humanitarian, which they're like a door to get deported. And on the other hand, we have to be very careful because of this is organized crime. So if any questions, please, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rita. Yeah, very, very horrible situation for migrant women there, being pushed out of their homelands, not only in Canada, but in many other imperialist countries around the world. We know that we're running a little behind schedule, but we thought we would take our break early. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and listen to our last two speakers, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the program. So we'll come back in 5 minutes. So you all can go ahead and take a break, grab some water, a snack, and join us in 5. While we're on the break, we'll show a short video of a protest that happened in Rotterdam just this past November in the Netherlands to oppose an exhibition on defense and security. Essentially, it was a weapons fair. So please take a look at our comrades who oppose this large gathering of heads of state, military personnel from around the world coming together to talk about how to destroy people around the world through weapon technology. So here's a short video. Okay, it's been 5 minutes. Hopefully folks have been able to use the restroom, grab a snack or water. And we'll go ahead and bring up our next presenter. Thanks everyone for your patience. Up next, we have Triana Wardani. Triana is the Secretary General of Seruni, a national democratic women's organization in Indonesia that focuses on gender equality and women's control over land and natural resources. She holds a degree in agriculture from Brawijaya University. In her role, she coordinates actions and campaigns across 17 provinces in Indonesia, addressing issues of gender equality and women's control over land and natural resources. The goal is to stop the land monopoly by big landlords and greedy corporations that control 42% of land for plantations and mining in Indonesia. Triana is also the coordinator for OBR, or 1 Billion Rising Indonesia, a campaign to stop violence against women. She holds seminars in many schools to raise awareness and prevent cases of violence against women and girls. OBR Indonesia rises every year on 14 February across 17 provinces, both in rural and urban areas. Triana leads and manages collective organic farming in Jambi province as a community resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. This initiative also serves as an adaptation and mitigation strategy across the climate crisis in Indonesia, spreading across the region. So please join me in welcoming Triana.
Oops. Yeah. Thank you, Donna. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night from Indonesia because it's like 1:23 a.m. here in Indonesia. So I'm so honored to be here with all of you guys. Now I would like to share the climate change impact on communities and women. Since I just came back from COP28 Dubai last week, so the Conference of Parties, known as COP, is the decision-making body responsible for monitoring and reviewing the implementation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it brings together 197 nations and territories called parties that have signed on the Framework Convention. The COP has met annually since 1995. The 21st session of the COP, held in Paris, France in December 2015, was historic in its outcome, the first international climate agreement. So yeah, I would like to share our world faces an unprecedented convergence of challenges with climate change at the forefront, impacting communities across the globe. Today, I'm honored to shed light on the interwoven complexities of climate change, violence against women, and militarism, and their disproportionate effect on the lives of women. Climate change, as well as economic collapse, war, and aggression emerged from the protracted crisis of the world monopoly capitalist system. It is inevitable that COP28 take place amidst the persistent resistance of the Palestinian people in facing war with Israel under the U.S. imperialist dictates, where tens of thousands of people were killed and millions became refugees. Imperialist war has become an extreme security threat to people's life amidst prolonged climate crisis. Climate change has emerged as the defining crisis of our era, and revealing ecosystems, intensifying natural disasters, and displacing communities. The impacts are far-reaching, but it's crucial to recognize that women bear a disproportionate burden. Environmental degradation leads to resource scarcity, affecting livelihoods and exacerbating gender inequalities. The resilience of communities, especially women, is tested as they grapple with the consequences of climate-induced disasters. The expansive nature of extractive industries in Indonesia, such as large-scale monoculture plantations of palm oil, rubber, sugarcane, and wood for pulp and paper, gold mining, coal, nickel, copper, and large-scale marble mining not only destroys the sovereignty of farmers of land and food, but also suppresses and deprives the rights of women as farmers, youth, and minority ethnic groups in rural areas across Indonesia. For instance, a small part of the struggle of women in Indonesia within the system is that of the Sakai women in Riau, Sumatra, who have to fight fiercely against land grabbing and monopoly by two major companies simultaneously. The largest oil company, Chevron, and the large palm oil plantation, PT Ivo Mas Tunggal, as part of Sinarmas Group. Extreme hot weather, changing seasonal cycle, drought, flash floods, tidal floods, erosions, forest fire, typhoons, landslides, crop failures, poverty, disease outbreaks, and even global hunger run very fast alongside the false solution snails from the COP annually. People are forced to adapt and build resilience to cover the failure of the global scheme for handling the climate crisis, which frees the climate destroyer countries from historical responsibility, prolonged loss and damage in poor countries, semi-colonial and semi-feudal countries such as Indonesia, and various countries in Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America. In the semi-feudal system maintained by imperialism, rural women in Indonesia face multiplied burden due to the persistence of patriarchal feudalism in society. Women increasingly live in underdevelopment, dependence, loss of all social conditions to progress and thrive, loss of crucial knowledge in agriculture production and medicinal plants, as well as rights to health, reproduction, and education. People are not blind. Monopoly corporations continue to destroy nature and the climate and the lives of the working class throughout the world. The urgent necessity to build a large and modern production system for the benefit of the people, environmentally friendly, and to end dependence on fossil fuel is covered with various rhetoric of false nature-based solutions, techno-fix, energy transitions, low carbon development, carbon capture storage, carbon offset, and rainforest protection pact. They're exactly just covers to maintain and protect the production of monopoly capitalists and big landlords who oppress and exploit the working class through the low wages politics and extreme poor working conditions, grab the land of peasants, deprive rights and life of fisherfolk, youth, women, and national minorities. Monopoly production and markets are increasingly brutal, so that the increase of Earth temperature can only be limited to 2.4 degrees Celsius to 2.6 degrees Celsius, a really big gap to reach the limit target of 1.5 degrees Celsius as greenhouse gas emission continue to increase. In the face of climate-induced chaos, the vulnerability of women is heightened. Displacement and resource scarcity create an environment conducive to gender-based violence. Women become targets facing not only the direct impact of environmental crisis, but also the insidious threat of abuse. The intersectionality of these issues demand our attention, urging us to address the root cause of violence against women embedded in the changing climate. Militarism further exacerbates the challenges faced by women in the wake of climate change. Conflict over dwindling resources led to displacement and heightened insecurity, disappropriately affecting women who find themselves on the front lines of violence. It is imperative to recognize the inseparable link between militarism and the environmental crisis as both intertwined to create a perilous cocktail threatening the fabric of our societies. Indonesia stands as a microcosm of these global challenges. Our nation grapples with the impact of climate change, witnessing firsthand the intertwining threats of violence against women and militarism. The recent International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women serves as poignant reminder of the urgent need to address these issues collectively. We, the nation and people of Indonesia, do not need $1 trillion imperialist investment funds to achieve zero emission by 2060. We do not want investment and foreign debt to be piled up again in our name and to be paid by the Indonesian nation and people in order to enrich a few people become richer so that they don't feel the bitter impact of the climate crisis. We, the nation and people of Indonesia, assert the rights to control over land and water and air, as well as control over labor and natural resources, be in the hands of our own nation and people. This can only be realized if the victory of the genuine land reform program and national industry can be achieved. This victory is all we need as a condition in order to be able to have our own capital to able to finance for handling of the climate crisis with our own capacities and even help other countries in the spirit of friendship between countries without borders. With a comprehensive understanding of the natural and social condition and existing fundamental contradiction, Seruni, along with farmers and minority ethnic organizations in various villages, advanced women's struggle in developing environmental collective of agriculture, fisheries, and farm for daily needs food crops. Food crops and local fruits, pure highland Robusta coffee plantation, seedling cultivation, and local fish development coexist with campaigns against the propaganda and practices of large-scale monoculture palm oil plantation and wood plantation that have damaged the environment and climate. These practices are part of the national struggle to achieve genuine land reform, to eliminate all forms of oppressions and exploitation by imperialism and feudalism in rural and urban areas as a social basis to realize a national industry that guarantees the progress and welfare of the people and the liberation of women. We believe that the struggle for a genuine land reform is also a fundamental path to restore the natural and climate condition in Indonesia and the world. Seruni provides strong solidarity, mutual assistance for the struggle of oppressed and exploited women and people, fighting for liberation from the exploitation and oppression of imperialism and feudalism in various countries. At the same time, Seruni rallies support and solidarity from people in various countries to strengthen the struggle of women, farmers, and the people of Indonesia in realizing the genuine land reform and the development of a national industry in Indonesia. Let us march forward in solidarity to end climate imperialism. Thank you. Long live international solidarity.
Thank you so much, Triana, for that very important analysis on the role that these corporations play in destroying the lands, especially there in Indonesia, and how that has an impact overall on climate, right? And really the driver behind all the climate catastrophes that we're experiencing is because of corporate greed. So thank you for exposing that. A reminder to all, again, if you have questions for any of our speakers, you can use the Q&A tool in the Zoom, and you can either express, messages of solidarity or answer or ask any questions. Finally, with our last speaker, and then we'll go into a video presentation, we have Hadil Shatara. So we all know and see the outcry of the world to end the unjust occupation of Palestine by the Zionist state of Israel. Today, we have Hadil Shatara, the coordinator of Samidun in Palestine. Samidun is an international network of organizers and activists working to build solidarity with Palestinian prisoners in their struggle for freedom. Samidun developed out of the September to October 11 hunger strike of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, seeing a need for a dedicated network to support Palestinian prisoners. They seek to amplify the voices of Palestinian prisoners, former prisoners, prisoner families, and Palestinian advocates for justice and human rights by translating, sharing, and distributing news, interviews, and materials from Palestine. Please welcome Hadil.
Thank you so much, Donna. Hello, everyone. I'm very grateful to be here and to get to be with all these strong, inspiring women. So thank you so much for having me. And from Palestine, I want to send a message of struggle to all the women in the world who are fighting against oppression, injustice, patriarchy, imperialistic systems. Today in Palestine, we're actually standing to confront the whole world. We're not only fighting the Zionist occupation, but we're also fighting for our existence. We're fighting against the American Western hegemony. We're fighting this a new liberal system very clearly and very purely. Our children, women, and youth are facing this Zionist killing machine. There are more than 20,000 marchers, including over 6,200 women marchers in Palestine and 8,000 child marchers. And the number of imprisoned women inside the Zionist jails has exceeded 150 women. We don't know anything. We don't have specific information about the names of these women, their conditions, their ages, or anything. All the numbers I just mentioned, these are just statistics. These are the general statistics everyone watches every day. And these numbers actually passes unnoticed by a lot of humanitarian international bodies who are supposed to be watching or fighting against dehumanization of humans around the world. So if they're not taking any action, they're biased. This is what we have noticed from the international bodies here in Palestine. We're living in these exceptional days, these days of heavy war, and today is the 72, we mark 72 days of aggression on Gaza. We're talking about 1.9 million Palestinians have been displaced from Gaza since October 7th. We have been experiencing a genocide against our people in Gaza. We have reached a point where they have been being buried alive. And we saw that yesterday on the news. They buried people in Gaza alive. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of women who have been displaced from their homes without the bare essentials of life. We're talking about no water, no food, no women health supplies. We're talking about catastrophic situation in Gaza with a widespread of diseases, infections, and more specifically, if we want to talk about pregnant women are now without health care. The childbirth process is being held without anesthesia, and there's no painkillers to reduce their pain. There's nothing left in Gaza today. The Zionist occupation is trying to wipe Gaza off the map. And we're facing a lot of continuing killing and bombing that you have been witnessing on the news since day one. I want to read a small quote written by one of the organizations about the mothers in Gaza. Mothers eat once per day in favor of their children's health. That is, if there's food. Lack of medical care, hygiene, and high levels of malnutrition while living in overcrowded shelters are a poisonous mix. Women are dying not only from bombing, but also from normally treated diseases. This is the situation of women in Gaza, and this is where the situation has led us. We're talking about 1.9 million people displaced. That is 85% of the population in Gaza. There have been displaced not once, but more than twice, actually. And we're talking about the demolishing or the damaging of 60% of the houses, of the civilian people houses in Gaza. What women in Gaza are enduring will not cease. This will not end soon. We know that they are target of killing, arrests, torture, in the Zionist prison's enemy. The testimonies of the freed prisoners, freed women prisoners that were freed at the beginning of this month, have said testimonies that are horrific, actually. specifically about the female or the women prisoners from Gaza. When we're talking about the women prisoners in Gaza, what they face is there's a daily beating where they collect all the female prisoners from Gaza and they put them in the yard of the prison and they start beating them and attacking them. There being assaults, rape threats, suppression, naked inspections, deprivation of clothing. There is no communication with the prisons and whatsoever. Lawyers are not allowed to visit the prisons. Families are not allowed to visit. There are no phone calls. There's no television, no radio. The prisoners get the news of what's happening outside when there's a new arrest. So when a new prisoner comes, this is how our prisoners inside the prison, especially the female, hear about the news around the world and hear about what's happening in Gaza. Some of the mothers inside the prison from Gaza were taken to prison after the 7th of October, and they left their kids in the street. So they're wondering what's happening to these kids. These are testimonies from free prisoners. So we're talking about they're not allowed to take showers. They allow them water to come 1 hour a day. And this is the general situation of the prisons. And imagine having this situation for women prisoners as well as men prisoners. So we're talking about silent killing of prisoners everywhere. The food inside the prisons is scarce. The meal is being provided by the prison administration. Previously, before October 7th, the prisoners gained the right to cook their own food. Now they're being fed by the administration once or twice a day in a very, very small portion, not even enough for a bird. Imagine for a human being. They are beating them inside their cells. They are throwing gas bombs inside the cells every single day. They are fully disconnected from the world. There's a report stating that there is one pregnant woman inside the prison. She's 3 months pregnant. We don't know her name yet. We have child prisoners, female prisoners underage inside the prisons. We don't have their names yet. They are denying us from getting their names, getting the exact number of prisoners, where they're holding them. We're getting no information from inside the Zionist prisons. So this is for what's happening in Gaza and what's happening inside the Zionist prisons. As for the West Bank, it's not comparable to Gaza, of course, but it doesn't mean that the situation in the West Bank is good. We face a daily Zionist attacks, a deprivation of freedom of movement. We're talking about the roads are cut off. There are checkpoints at every single corner in the West Bank. So all the cities and all the towns are cut off from each other. The educational institutions are forced to close. Nor students, neither the teachers can get to the universities. On top of all that, the Palestinian, there are daily home invasions. We have almost 90 to 100 arrests every single day in the West Bank. Among them, they arrest women too. On top of all that, the Palestinian Authority is being a part of all this. It continues to deprive people from raiding the streets. They even shot a young child, a female, a young woman. They killed her, the Palestinian Authority, in one of the demonstrations for Gaza. She was 12 years old, a girl. And now they're calling the female activists and the women activists, they're calling their family to threaten them so they can stay out of the streets, so they don't participate in any of what's anything that is happening. And they've been reporting to the Israeli side about these activists. So they're threatening family, they're using all the conservative community laws against women. So if you want to talk about what's happening to women in Palestine, we are facing state repression. We are facing forced migration. We are facing wars and aggression, economic exploitation. Name any catastrophe in the world, and I'm sure we have it here in Palestine. This leads us to a final question. What can be done and what should we do? We have to continue to resist. Resistance is our right until our freedom is returned. We don't believe in all the Western official organizations, nor do we expect any good from them. The white government in America and the West are partners in our annihilation. Today, we see that our victory in Palestine is a victory for the whole world. Because if you fight here, if you fight the Zionist occupation, you're fighting the whole imperialist system. And this is what's clearly happening here. In Palestine, we understand that our road to this and our path is joint struggle. We stand with all women going through similar experiences in Philippines, Kurdistan, Sudan, Kashmir, Colombia, Congo, in all the South countries who are being robbed by the West and the American system and the imperialist system. Our struggle is one, our victory is one, and today we must support the Palestinian women, amplify their voices, boycott and isolate this occupation, and clearly stand against the imperialist West and their Zionist baby. Gaza is not a passing issue, and Palestine will change the world. We're sure about that. And today we're talking about a global change due to the Palestinian cause. And in the past 2 months, we have seen a global change. And this means that it's time for a joint action. It's time for us to all work together and begin to fight for the freedom of Palestine and to fight for our national liberation. And this is the key to fight the imperialism. And I just want to mention an activity that we can all work on together on the New Year's Eve. Instead of partying, we are going to be marching through the streets, fighting for our freedom. So we hope you all join. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hadil. Very important to be talking about what's happening in Palestine right now. I don't think there's any news station or social media platform that isn't discussing what's happening there. The world is with you, and it's something the media is trying to prevent people from seeing, but the world is with you, and we will fight with you until we have a free Palestine. So thank you so, so much. We will definitely include the New Year's Eve call to action in our announcements later. So again, to save on time, I think we're going to cut back on the video that we were planning to show. If we have time at the end, we can show a video of workers that have been exploited by the Nike Corporation. But for now, we will open it up for any questions. We apologize again that we didn't set up the chat feature in the way that we wanted. So if folks do have questions for any of our speakers, you can again go to the Q&A feature. If you go to your Zoom application, there is under the section that says more at the bottom of your screen, you can click on Q&A and it should bring up a feature there to be able to type in any questions or comments. So we'll just give it a few minutes if folks have any comments to share, including the panelists. If you have any questions for each other, you can also go ahead and unmute and just ask. So we'll just take a few minutes to do that. You can also see the Q&A feature. There's a kind of like dialogue box there with Q&A letters if you have any questions to ask. Just to share a solidarity message from Yasmin Ahmed, who's also part of the Samidu network based in the Netherlands. Says thank you to Hadil, sending so much solidarity to Palestinian women and all the people of Palestine. It is so true that Palestine is teaching so many what resilience and steadfast resistance means and why it is necessary. Yes, thank you, Yasmin. Any other questions or comments? And if folks want to send in your questions later, you can definitely do that. You can just email them to IWA, International Women's Alliance at gmail.com, and we can field those questions over to the panelists at a later time. We have another message from a member of our another member from the Netherlands, Maitet, from Palestine to the Philippines, down with US imperialism. Our struggle is your struggle. Here's another message of solidarity from Jacqueline Mendez. Thank you so much to all the amazing speakers and for all of their relentless work. We stand with you. We support your struggle and resistance. Long live international solidarity and long live the resistance, resistance until liberation. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you again to all of our participants as well. This has been an incredible lineup of speakers, very, very important information. And we hope that we can continue to build the solidarity together with each other as we can see the dire situation that women are facing all around the world because of imperialist domination, because of neoliberal policies. These are, the larger systems that further perpetuate systemic violence against women in various different forms. And it's necessary that we continue to build a resistance movement of women who continue to fight. And so thank you again to all of our speakers who not only are experiencing these systems, but are also committed and dedicated to joining together in solidarity and to fight in a show of unity. We'll go ahead and get to our calls to action. So with each of the different presentations, there was very important information shared. And so here we've compiled the different calls to action. So from ANWO to support the Arrest CPS campaign, you can go to their website and read more about the particular campaign to hold accountable the Child Protective Services Agency. And also attend Black Mother's Day March in Washington, D.C. So we can share more information about that. With the No to APEC Coalition and my story, to join the campaign against police brutality during the No to APEC protests, continue to oppose APEC in Peru in 2024. There was also some links shared in different ways that you can support financially the ongoing campaign to wage the campaign against police brutality and to also support Sarah Martin, who was one of the climate justice activists also victimized by the repression that happened during the No to APEC protests. And then for our migrants to continue to support the campaigns of the International Migrants Alliance, which is another alliance that IWA works very closely with to uplift the stories and struggles of migrant women around the world, as Rita also shared the particular impacts that are happening to women there in Montreal. And then with Triana's presentation, exposing the COP28 to support the genuine land reform and national industry in Indonesia as the true solution, right? And to oppose the false climate solutions that further impact women in Indonesia and people around the world. And then, of course, with the struggle of Palestine, join local actions calling for ceasefire and support Sami Dun's demand to free all political prisoners on December 31st, which is New Year's Eve. Boycott and isolate the Zionist occupation of Palestine and continue to mobilize in solidarity for the people of Palestine until their right for return. Sounds like there are a couple of other questions and comments in the Q&A. There is a question here from Anna Bayet. Anna is a member of Resist US-Led War Seattle chapter, also a member of IWA. Can you speak to the effects of militarism on women internationally and the ways in which women are fighting back against imperialist wars? So if anyone would like to take up that question. Anyone willing to speak on the effects of militarism on women internationally?
I can talk a little bit about it. So in the Philippines, I think it was just this year that 4 additional US military bases were opened, making a total of 9 military bases that exist in the Philippines. And we know As US military enters into countries like our own, really devastating our sovereignty, that this also means a lot of violence against women. There's a lot of forced prostitution, increases in sex trade in spaces like these that really have devastating impacts on women and children. So there was a case, I think it was back in 2014, where a trans Filipino woman named Jennifer Laude was brutally killed by a US Marine, Scott Pemberton. And actually, he got off scot-free, essentially, and he lives in the United States as a free man, even though he has been found guilty of, you know, sexual and physical violence to the point of killing a trans Filipino woman. And so, you know, we see that this is a systemic violence that continues, but really women and families of those impacted have really been at the forefront of fighting against US military bases in the Philippines, have really been the ones resisting time and time again, alongside, you know, really the entirety of the Filipino people's struggle. So that's one way it impacts our country.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully that answers the question. There is a really great film that highlights the story of Jennifer Laude. If folks are interested, the film is called Call Her Ganda. And it really makes the connection of US militarization and the impacts of women in the Philippines, and the role that US imperialism plays in, um, you know, ensuring that, you know, the culprits in these cases are let off scot-free without any consequences. Um, so thank you. It sounds like the response was sufficient enough to answer the next question, which was about how do we strengthen the anti-imperialist women's movement globally. So thank you, Mai, for also responding to that. We are running out of time, and I believe that is also the remainder of the questions. You can continue to send in your questions to our Gmail account, and we will make sure to send them out to our presenters. Thank you once again, everyone, for being here. We just have one last announcement. It's sort of a save the date announcement. If folks could already start to think about plans for the future to continue building a strong anti-imperialist movement alongside IWA and other anti-imperialist groups and alliances around the world. This coming June in Penang, Malaysia, the International Women's Alliance will be holding its third International Assembly. All are invited. It'll be June 17 to 18. Following the assembly, there will be what's called an International Festival of People's Rights and Struggles. And it's sort of a combination of various different activities, events, workshops, forums, you know, cultural presentations for 2 days. And then right after the festival will be the 7th International Assembly for the International League of People's Struggle, or ILPS, and that will be June 21 to 24. All of it happening in Malaysia, all in the same venue. So please start talking to your members, organizations, and other potential, you know, interested groups and individuals that you think might benefit from attending. So we hope to see you there in Malaysia this June. IWA will be sending out information soon on registering, and the details for the exact location and things like that. So that is the conclusion of our webinar. I think to close out, maybe we'll just show the video and folks are welcome to stay and listen. It's a short 2-minute video from our comrades with the Global Labor Justice, who's been doing an amazing job working with various different unions in the Asia Pacific region, fighting for the rights of migrant workers. And so we wanted to share some of the interviews of these migrant workers who are right now confronting Nike as one of the largest retail manufacturers in the world, exploiting thousands of women workers. So here's their story. 1 second as we fix the sound. Do you want me to try on my end, Katie?
I'm just trying to get the video to start over. Sorry, 1 second.
I see. Okay, no worries.
tidak terpenuhi gizinya yang baik. Kemudian juga kondisi ini yang mendorong saya untuk menyuarakan dan menuntut tanggung jawab pihak merek yang selama ini menutup mata dan telinga atas derita saya sekeluarga dan ribuan pekerja beserta keluarganya selama COVID. Dan tidak pernah dipenuhi hingga saat ini. Oleh karena itu, saya bergabung ke dalam kampanye ini agar semua orang di sini bisa mendengar dan melihat bagaimana Nike bersembunyi di balik perusahaan saya dan menutup mata dan telinga atas derita yang kami alami untuk selayak-layaknya, karena kami itu pekerjanya pasti membuat fasilitas atau bahkan produk Nike yang lebih yang berkualitas yang tinggi. Bahkan kami bekerja dari pagi sampai sore membuat produk Nike, alas kaki seperti sepatu itu kita membuatnya itu sebagai kualitas yang bagus, tapi apa Nike ngasih apa ke kita?
ஏன்னு கேட்டா எனக்கு நிறைய கஷ்டத்துல விழுந்து கடன் ஆகிருச்சு. கொரோனா பிரச்சனை, பொருளாதார பிரச்சனைனால நிறைய கடன்ல தான் நாங்க இருக்கோம். வீல் பினான்ஸை கட்டிக்க இயலாம நிறைய கடன்ல இருக்கிறோம். நாங்க ஐட்ராமணில வேலை செஞ்சுக்கிட்டு இருக்கும்போது எங்கனால அதிக லாபத்தை தான் நைக்கி சம்பாரிச்சிருந்தாங்க. அதிக லாபம் நாங்க வேலை செஞ்சதுனால தான் அவங்களுக்கு அந்த லாபம் கிடைச்சிச்சு. 18 மில்லியன் அளவுக்கு அவங்களுக்கு லாபம் கிடைச்சிருக்கதா சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. இந்த தொகையை அவங்க பெற்று கொடுத்தாங்கன்னா எங்க வாழ்க்கை நிச்சயமா மாறும். நான் மட்டும் இல்ல, நிறைய பெண்களுக்காக நான் கதைச்சு கொண்டிருக்கேன். பெண்கள்ல ஆண்கள்ல நிறைய தொழிலாளர்களுக்காக தான் நான் கதைக்கிறேன். அவங்களுக்கு கதைக்க முடியல, என்னால நான் முன்னுக்கு வந்து கதைக்கன்றனால நான் கதைக்கிறேன். கட்டாயம் இவங்க இதை பெற்று கொடுக்கும் வரை, இந்த காசை பெற்று கொடுக்கும் வரை நான் போராட்டத்தை கைவிட போறதில்ல. நான் தொடர்ந்து போராடத்தான் போறேன். ஏன்னு கேட்டா இந்த நிலைமை மத்தவங்களுக்கு வரக்கூடாது, வரவும் விட மாட்டேன்.
So you can find out more information about their campaign to hold Nike accountable with Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum. They've joined together to wage a campaign called Fight the Heist. So please go ahead and check that out and support the garment workers, which employ, as we know, millions of women in the Asia Pacific region. So thank you all again for joining us today. That is the conclusion of our webinar. And thank you all so much. We'll see you again in the next event. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.